Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined by Aaron for a very special video. The first episode of the Pixar Retrospective is here, and we are going to be talking about Toy Story on the week of its 30th anniversary, which begins this weekly series that will take us all the way through to June 2026 with Toy Story 5's release date. This is not something that was intentionally planned by Pixar. It might just be the best scheduled coincidence of all time. But before we talk about that, Aaron, how are we doing today?
Not too bad, thank you. I'm not too bad. I'm looking forward to talking about Toy Story because I haven't actually seen this for a while, so I'm glad to be talking about it. Yeah.
I might be the same as you. We didn't get a fancy re-release like America. They got it, I think,
No.
a couple of months ago.
Mm.
I think it was the same weekend we got Avatar 2 re-released, which no one went and saw on the re-release because, can I be the guy that says it? You kind of should be re-releasing 1 and 2 together and like a week before Avatar 3, not 2-3 months before for no reason. So that's a different conversation, a different video series. James Cameron hasn't done any Pixar videos. I'm just scanning in my head to see if his work has been parodied in Pixar. It might have been. But we are going to be talking this, and I guess it is worth mentioning for everybody at home. As this is a new weekly retrospective series, we will be uploading a review every single Tuesday, as we mentioned. This is going to be taking on the Pixar series, beginning with Toy Story 1, taking us all the way through to Toy Story 5. And if you look at the screen, if you're watching, you can see a lovely few schedules where we have all of the respective release dates. We're doing it in chronological order, and it is going to be a mammoth task. I think this will be the second largest series ever on the channel. The largest being when we did the Spielberg retrospective a couple of years ago, which was my favourite series we've probably done in the 10+ years of doing stuff on here. But yes, the Pixar one is quite a challenge. It's incredibly varied. And I'm only able to do this with the help of many people who have reached out, who've spoke about being on these reviews. Aaron, I have you on the first one. And where I'm going to begin this, before we talk about Toy Story, with this being your first time on this series, I'll answer this question after. What is your earliest memory of a Pixar film?
Oh, bloody hell. I think my earliest memory is it's either Toy Story or Monsters, Inc. And I want to say it was either just stumbling across it on TV because in the UK, ITV have a habit of showing Pixar films quite a lot. But I know for certain that when I was younger, there was like a select few VHSs that I watched to death. Some of them were classic Disney films like Robin Hood, Aristocats, that sort of thing. But I think the two Pixar films that I watched relentlessly as a kid were Toy Story 2 and Monsters, Inc. And still to this day, those are two of my favourite Pixar films. And again, I think those were also two of the Pixar films that were shown the most on TV. So those two specifically are ones that I watched relentlessly as a kid and can probably quote back to front. And since then, I've just kind of had this love for Pixar that's never kind of gone away, despite the quality dipping throughout the years. I've always had an appreciation and a love for the studio, and it's one of those things where, like, even though they've only been around since the mid-90s, because of the age I am, they've always felt like they've been around. I can't imagine a time where they've not existed. Kind of a bit like Disney as a whole. I can't really imagine a time where they've never been around, despite knowing the history of how they came to be. But yeah, for me, I can't imagine animation being the same as it is without them, and I've always had a soft spot for them, even when the films get naff. There's always still like a charm, a little bit like Studio Ghibli. There's always a charm to it that I just keep coming back to.
Yeah, that's very fair. I'm kind of in the same boat with you. So for mine, I'm in that similar age group. I had the VHSs. Toy Story 2 is the one. I think that would have been the one we probably were taken to the cinema for, maybe. But I have 3 distinct VHSs: Toy Story 1, Bug's Life, Toy Story 2.
Yep.
But added in some context, I'll get into it heavily on the Toy Story 2 episode. We have the Toy Story 2 PS1 game. that's when I started getting merchandise toys. Obviously, being that age as a toddler, I was born in '96, and it's the Toy Story films that have like not solidified Pixar to me, but they are the
Mm.
favourites amongst it all. And as I got older and into films more, and we started going back, I think it's very fair to say that the appreciation for the studio, for differing reasons, really couldn't be appreciated in like my late teens. That you look at when they began, i.e., mid
Mm.
'90s, releasing their films, what they accomplished, what they did for the industry, and the
Mm.
quality of those films. And you kind of said it too. Like we've got the schedules. You've seen the 3 different photos if you're watching at home. The first, me and you spoke before, like the first 11 is probably one of the strongest runs of studios I've ever seen
Mm.
go on. Just as a whole, a studio,
Yeah.
and not that the quality isn't there later. It is, but there's
Mm.
certainly sequels, prequels, inconsistencies. Studio politics have been a part of it, and they're all things
Oh.
we're exploring across the next 6 to
Mm.
7 months. God, that is terrifying to out loud. So I'm excited to do the series
Mm.
and to do them. And I think for me,
Mm.
animation isn't my strongest suit of knowledge. So
Mm.
I am looking forward to bringing the opinions of other people. A lot of these films
Yeah.
I might have only seen once. A lot of these films I might not have seen for maybe 10, 15 years. So I'm excited
Mm.
to revisit a lot of them and see if a lot has changed for me over the years. And
Yeah.
it's kind of fitting, right? That it's the 30th anniversary of Toy Story. Like now
Mm.
was the time to do the series for me.
Yeah, no, I was also going to say as well, I don't know why I completely blanked on this, is that despite watching those films as a kid on VHS, Finding Nemo, I'm pretty sure, was the first film I ever saw in the cinema.
Oh, I thought I said DVD.
No, it was the first film I remember, because I was trying to work this out in my head. Like, I vividly remember seeing Spider-Man 2 and Scooby-Doo 2 in the cinema, but those were 2004. But I remember very vividly seeing Finding Nemo in the cinema in 2003, and I think that might have been the earliest thing I saw in the cinema. So don't know why that completely blanked, because it's a very big thing. But yeah, that's kind of something else that I think that's why it's mentally a thing of like Pixar have always been there mentally, because I watched them a lot on VHS, and there's also that very big memory that for some reason I completely forgot to mention.
No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, it's fun, and we're going to do this with all the guests that come on, so you won't get grilled with this again. Don't worry. But it's funny because everyone's going to have a different experience on memory, age dependent,
Mm.
history dependent, and it's kind of exciting with these. But I
Mm.
guess if we really start kickstarting Toy Story, we'll
Yeah.
do the IMDb plot synopsis, and it's quite a mouthful for this one, which really did catch me off guard. A cowboy doll is profoundly jealous when a new spaceman action figure supplants him as the top toy in a boy's bedroom. When circumstances separate them from their owner, the duo have to put aside their differences to return to him.
Mm.
I mean, that is the whole film. And I'm kind of going to
Mm.
kickstart this. One thing that throws me every single time I see this film, it's not just one name in the credits we spoke about, who might bring up later on at some point very quickly.
Mm.
It's also the fact it's an 81-minute runtime.
Yeah.
And maybe because it's been a huge part of 30 years of film, whatever. I'm not saying it doesn't feel like it's 81 minutes, but I'm like, wow, that's a lot shorter than I remember it being every time I watch it. And the film
Mm.
flies by. There is not a
Mm.
frame wasted in this.
Mm.
And I think that's very important because of how they had to make this film, what this film contributed to cinema. But I can't really give my earliest memories of Toy Story because, as I said, it was there. It was this, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2. I didn't have the attachment to Monsters, Inc. I remember
Mm.
Monsters, Inc. coming out, but we did not get taken to the cinema. I remember it through maybe a PS1 or 2 game I had at a friend's at primary school.
Mm.
But I didn't have that connection to Monsters, Inc., whereas the Toy Story ones, I should have really dug the photos out, but I'm not arrogant enough. I
Mm.
have a birthday cake from, it's surely, I don't know what year, it'll either be 98, 99, or 2000, so I'd have been 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah.
And we've gone to the same bakery, no joke, for decades, our family. Genuinely not nostalgia, the nicest cakes. They still today. I don't know how they pass the recipes on, but they have. My sister's partner met someone in Vietnam that had been to this bakery. And it's only in a town where it's not some big posh nonsense. It is like a legit family bakery passed down as generations.
Yeah.
They would always make the most incredible custom cakes. And they'd put RC on it, and I definitely had a Toy Story themed birthday at one of
Mm,
those early years. So that's where I'm kind of going. My memories of Toy Story 1, obviously, I don't know my
mm,
first memory, but as the decades have gone by, I'm
mm,
not going to kickstart episode 1 of a 31 episode series saying this is the best Pixar film.
mm,
But certainly when we get around to the top 10 after the series is said and done, I assume Toy Story 1 will be quite high up amongst a couple of other heavyweights.
mm,
And I think I've been able to appreciate this film at different periods of my life. Loved
yeah.
it still as a kid, loved it still as a teenager, love it still as an adult.
Mm,
I have, if I'm allowed to say so, a niece on the way coming next year.
mm,
So in a couple of years, this will be obviously shown to another generation. So I have to add as well, one of the reasons it works well as an adult, there's a lot of very adult jokes in it that
yeah.
land so well that they're harmless for children, right?
Mm,
But as adults, it's kind of oh, they went there, but you know what? That's fine, and I
mm,
quite like it. And I kind of miss films that do that somewhat. Not to sound like an adult, but you got to think like,
mm,
if you're an adult at the cinema with a kid and there's primarily kids' films, I
mm,
guess a rare adult joke thrown at them probably like catches them off guard in a good way. But I
mm,
also think this film is universal. That as a concept, the
mm.
concept's so great that anyone could have not had this idea because they clearly didn't. But the concept is there for anyone of any age to watch this film, and it
Mm,
is that what if this happened?
yeah.
But yeah, my memories are pretty profound, and we'll really dive into them. But what about you?
Mm.
This you the same as me? Not as much memories, or have you got a bit more?
It's a weird one, and again, this probably goes back to why it feels like Pixar have always been there. Is that because by the time I was a kid and can actually remember me being a kid, again, Toy Story had already come out, and I remember getting a lot of Toy Story related things when I was a kid. Like I had the Woody doll, I had the Buzz Lightyear doll. Pretty sure I had a Slinky, and I feel like I had the RC, but I'm not 100% sure. Um, I'm also pretty sure that I had, I think for one birthday, the like really naff plastic table cover that was covered in like the Toy Story font and logo with Woody and Buzz on it. So I'm pretty sure I had a Toy Story themed birthday, but it's just kind of always been there, and I remember seeing it a lot as a kid. But I've always, again, like you said, I loved it as a kid. I love it now. I loved it when I was a teenager. I probably still continue to love it and the sequels. Um, but it's just always been there, and I've always liked it slash loved it, even though I've had more of a like nostalgic connection and affinity to other Pixar films because I had more involvement with them when I was a kid. Like I think again, Monsters Inc. being a big one. I had the PS1 game for that and played the ever living Christ out of it. Um, and there are other Pixar films, like early ones that is, that I played more of and had more involvement with. But again, Toy Story has just always been that one, that constant. Hence why I think it's the reason that Pixar keep coming back to it every couple of years to do another sequel for it, because it's the one that started them off, and it's the one that they can always rely on. Some people might not like the later sequels, but I can completely understand why they keep coming back to it. Yeah, that's kind of the earliest memories I have of it. It's just kind of always been there.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree, and we'll talk about the legacy later. But certainly, if you look at Pixar, right? They've done shorts for so many things, and I should have probably said this. Although we're doing the Pixar retrospective, I'm not including the shorts. Otherwise, that would
Mm.
just be insane. Maybe one day, if people want it after the series, we'll do a video on shorts. But the fact they then start doing Toy Story shorts on top of these films and the sequels and the games and other things and other media, it's quite fascinating. If I'm totally honest, and
Mm.
you are right. Toy Story is it's kind of the crown jewel of the studio, right? And is it because it started off even the colors? I look at the Toy Story
Mm.
logo. I look at the ball.
Yeah.
It's the yellow, it's the blue, it's the bit of the red, and it's the one that feels the most. How do I say it? Uh, Universal. And
Yeah.
maybe it's because it's about toys. Maybe it's because it's chosen, although it's made in the 90s, set in the 90s, there's a sort of somewhat 50s 60s theme, and we'll get into the thematics, but it is going from that westerns into science fiction, and
Mm.
anyone of any age understands that. And we've probably been through things where you phase out certain toys for others and vice
Mm.
versa. And I think there's parts of this film that I don't know if they thought about it at the time, but 30 years later, we'll be talking about it in a way that maybe others haven't, or things others haven't thought about, or maybe it's exactly what people thought and prepared it to be. But
Yeah.
that being said, let's talk some behind the scenes and some production, which for anyone at home that's curious, this is the first episode. I kind of wrote a joke on the schedule at some point. How do we discuss this for some parts? This is obviously the first Pixar feature film. The history of Pixar as a studio is its own story, predating the release of Toy Story. And it goes all the way back to a certain George Lucas. It goes maybe even further back from that when you bring John Lasseter in. But for what it's worth for the discussion points, George Lucas was involved in the creation of the Pixar computer animation software. It was a part of Lucasfilm in the 80s. You very well reminded me of the ILM documentary Before We Hit Live, which details the creation of this studio, I would actually say better than the Pixar story did. Pixar story, a great behind the scenes documentary. That more chronicles the first, what would we say, 5 films? But the ILM on Disney Plus, absolutely recommend it. It will go into this better than I ever can or will. But essentially, George Lucas didn't see the use of this moving forward. So he would go on to sell Pixar to Steve Jobs. And John Lasseter was a part of that, who becomes an integral part of the future of Pixar, the future of filmmaking. I'm going to plug our Tron review because we did the Tron reviews, not Aries, just me alone on that one. When we spoke about 1982 Tron, I put a quote in there from John Lasseter saying there'd be no Toy Story without Tron. And the reason I do that is not just to plug our Tron review, is also the fact that John Lasseter watched that and he wanted to essentially from that point do computer animation. So he went on his own career path. He went to work for Disney themselves. He would get sacked from Disney after implying they should look at doing computer animation. He then got picked up by George Lucas and Lucasfilm to be part of this Pixar. Essentially, it all comes together without me short-circuiting and jumping ahead for a short film that would go on to win Best Animated Short at the Oscars. The first short made from computer, not generated imagery, computer animation. Due to this, sorry if I'm waffling, but I want you to jump in after. After Tin Toy is released, the name of the short, after it wins the Oscar, Disney are desperate for Lasseter to come back because obviously of his success elsewhere. And he has no intention of going back to them after they sacked him, but he does not want to work with them. At the same time, Pixar want to make their first feature film. So they would go on to make a deal with Disney, which apparently, I believe, is the second ever time Disney did this after The Nightmare Before Christmas with Tim Burton, where Disney were happy for them to another studio to make the film that would be a Disney film outside of Disney. I've got no idea how that sounds saying it out loud. I hope that makes sense. Jump in. Did I miss something? Do you have thoughts on them? I know I've literally just covered 15 years in about 2 minutes, so I am jumping and stretching.
No, I think you've covered most of the bases. For some reason, this is the thing. I'm trying to think back to that ILM documentary because that's where I first found out about the whole Pixar was computer. Then it became, John Lasseter's thing instead of Lucasfilms, and then it became the company that we know today. I didn't know about that before watching that documentary. I knew Steve Jobs was involved in it to some extent, but that ILM documentary was the first time I knew about it. And me trying to remember back to that, I'm trying to think if John Knoll was involved in any capacity, because I know he had a massive involvement in... I know he was part of ILM and then went on to make Photoshop.
Without assuming, I think this predates John Knoll by a couple of years. I think.
Yeah.
Does John Knoll join... I think John Knoll joined joined ILM maybe in the late 80s, early 90s. I think they brought him on board for... Not for
just
the
after
prequels.
Jurassic Park, wasn't it?
I want to say, I think he's mid to late 90s, and he's part of the prequel gang, if we can call them that. And I think at that point, he's missed the window. I think Lasseter is that like early to mid 80s. Lucasfilm was very much in the, we've done the Star Wars trilogy. when are we doing the
Mm.
prequels? And then that was obviously, which that documentary beautifully displays, that
Yeah.
George Lucas was building the technologies that would change our
Mm.
world
Mm.
legitimately, not just film, outside of film. George Lucas was innovating, that's probably the
Mm.
correct term, in the
Yeah.
background, all the way up to Jurassic Park. And I think once Jurassic Park comes out, there's the big bang.
Mm.
And that's when George's like, right, let's go build a team, let's go make Star Wars.
Mm.
But once again, I mean, George Lucas, the man, the
Mm.
myth, the legend, is once again theoretically behind one of the most important films ever made. Whilst it's the
Mm.
creation of the software of the studio, that's
Yeah.
still a big part of it. And whilst he
Mm.
sold it,
Mm.
it's still wild that this just sat there within Lucasfilm, like just
Yeah.
casually, made Pixar and didn't really do anything with it, so sold it to Steve Jobs. Like,
Yeah.
I know that undersells the importance of it,
Mm. I
but
think what also well, not helps, but I think what also, if for those who haven't seen that documentary, I think it's quite interesting for that late 80s to early 90s period is that, like, and understandably so, the people that worked at ILM were so used to the old practical way of doing it, they were so stubborn to move into that digital realm. And it was Jurassic Park that was the one that kind of pushed it over. But it is interesting to see that stubbornness of them not wanting to use the Pixar computer, hence why it just gathered dust until Lasseter bought it. That whole aspect I do find quite interesting because at the same time I completely understand why they would be so stubborn because they know those ways, they want to stick to it, it's tried and tested and it's worked for 20 years already. But at the same time it's like, it's the Pixar computer, come on.
I don't think anyone had seen the capabilities of it from a filmmaking perspective, if that's maybe a politer term.
Yeah.
And I think because we've got John Lasseter, who, as we kind
Mm.
of mentioned, he's had this affection with Tron,
Yeah.
and he wants to do something like that.
Mm.
I certainly believe, and I'm not just implying this, I'm not making this up. This is what I would think in my head. If George Lucas had a known
Mm.
that would go on to do that,
Yeah.
I still think he'd have sold it, but I
Mm.
think he'd have had a different, not valuation, I'm sure that would have been different too, but
Mm.
I think he would have probably put a bit more attention into ensuring it goes. I mean, he was very happy with Steve Jobs. That worked out
Mm.
well ultimately.
Mm.
But you contextually as well, George Lucas in the mid 90s, he's thinking about one thing only. It isn't making animated films, it's making the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
His 15 years have been leading up to that.
Mm.
And I think it's fascinating that Pixar comes from this, that it
Mm.
inherently begins with George. Steve Jobs as well, an innovator of his time.
Mhm.
Did he own it through to the sale to Disney in the mid noughties? I can't remember that. I'm not entirely sure. He probably
Yes.
did.
Yeah. I want to say yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just fascinating that it has all these humongous names. It's Steve Jobs, George
Mm.
Lucas, like that's wild in 2025. Imagine that like in 85, like
Mm.
Apple's getting bigger, but it's not the Apple
Mm.
of today. And
Yeah.
retrospectively, that sort of makes it even bigger. And to then make a short film and win an
Mm.
Oscar and have Disney crawling back to you without me getting into Disney politics. Obviously, Disney
Mm.
of today is different to the mid to late 80s, as we spoke about, ironically, with Tron. Um, for them to have been desperate to get someone they sacked, I can't
Yeah.
imagine doing that too much these days. And
Mm.
I have to kind of give Lasseter a lot of credit. They only wanted Lasseter. They had no intention of Pixar. They
Mm.
just wanted Lasseter working on their films because of what he'd
Mm.
done of the short. And the fact that obviously he'd found something that worked for him, something he wanted to continue with, and
Yeah.
Disney were fine to invest in that as long as they got him with it. I
Yeah.
kind of appreciate that, although it is somewhat psychotic of me to say
Mm.
I appreciate that. I kind of miss that in today's filmmaking.
Mm.
That wouldn't be not just Disney. That wouldn't be done by any studio. They wouldn't allow another studio to work if they wanted one person. They would
Yeah.
tell that one person it's us or nothing, and that would be
Mm.
that. And I really like that they obviously went for this
Mm.
in the late 80s, early 90s. But obviously, it leads into the creation of Toy Story, which is a
Mm.
story in itself. But I'm just going to bring up a couple of names of people we're going to talk about over the next 7 months for directors who were
Mm.
all a part of this first film. We've got Pete Docter, Andrew Stanton, Joe Ranft, I can never pronounce it, Lee Unkrich, or I always think of the Uruk Hai. I don't know why. It's nothing spelled anything like
I
that.
thought it was Lee Unkirk, but I think
Maybe it's that.
I think I've put the I and the R in the wrong place my entire life. So
It could
ignore
be.
me.
It could be pronounced, but these were all key players in the very first Pixar film, which I also find fascinating in the year 2025, looking back at the studio's
Mm.
history, where everyone was kind of there on day one.
Yeah.
Everyone who would be not necessarily founding fathers as such, but obviously we'd had other people.
Mhm.
Brad Bird got involved and he ends up doing films. We've had other directors come into making animated films that maybe
Mm.
aren't a part of Pixar today. But to see the core group of people there from the beginning,
Yeah.
and again, that I'll reference the Pixar story does a very good job. Whilst it's
Mm.
behind the scenes documentaries are fascinating for me because sometimes they feel like PR, like good PR.
Mm.
And without disrespect to them, when they're DVD extras, it definitely tends to be the good PR. But
Mm.
as you said, the ILM one, when you get an incredible documentary series, which was season one, 8 or 6 episodes that covered 1975 to 1993, was it?
I think it was eight.
Um,
Yeah.
Whereas I love season two, but obviously, not really a spoiler, but that was very much almost an epilogue series to, hey, this is kind of what we did for 20 years after, and this is why we're doing it now because of this backlot that's closing down, which
Mm.
is still very good. But
Yeah.
they could have easily done 2, 3 more seasons if I'm going to be that guy that says I want more.
Mm.
And I know I shouldn't, says Anakin Skywalker. What do we think of this behind the scenes? I mean, again, I know I've glossed
Mm.
over it, and this is more
Yeah.
the politics going into making Toy Story. But what are
Mm.
your thoughts initially on that, leading up to them starting work on this film?
I mean, again, coming from someone who loves that ILM series, I just find all of this stuff fascinating. Like, I just lap this shit up. But I do. I looking at like the directors involved, it does. It is quite interesting. Like all those four plus Lasseter are like the five directors that I think of when I think of Pixar. Um, Maybe not Brad Bird because he only did like two, but obviously again he came in at like a later stage. But those are the names, and I do find it interesting how, again, going off of what we've said, especially looking back at it from like a retrospective point of view, it is quite weird how like, oh, this person plus Steve Jobs led to that. It's weird seeing how all the bits interconnect, and you would saying this to like someone who maybe doesn't know the connections, they probably would have never thought, oh, Steve Jobs is part of the reason Pixar is what it is today. Probably would have never put two and two together. But it always goes back to George Lucas being more innovative than I think people gave him credit for at the time, which is again something that the Ireland documentary really does a good job of highlighting. Because one of the things is like, if it wasn't for George Lucas, we wouldn't have digital editing software like we would nowadays. Again, going back to John Knoll creating Adobe and Photoshop and that sort of thing. That's one element. Pixar is another. And I think there's a lot of things that we take for granted now in film.
Yeah.
Pixar being one of them, CG animation. And again, it always goes back to George Lucas. Whether you love or hate the guy, you cannot discredit what he's done for the film industry in the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Like that.
Everything goes back to him.
Yeah, Pixar, I think, is the biggest testament. Obviously, ILM is like the first crown jewel, but like I feel like Pixar is the next best one to kind of go, this is because of him.
It's another one that does that, and I think we've got degrees. We edit, we do stuff like that. Digital editing. Who was the guy that propped that up to make the industry more accessible through digital filmmaking? George Lucas. Now,
Yep.
I'm going to say this is a compliment, and I'm going to plug Star Wars Sessions. They did an amazing episode on Attack of the Clones recently, just on the behind the scenes of George Lucas. But George Lucas theoretically created digital filmmaking because he wanted to basically be able to do it there and then. He wanted to be able to edit things later on, do things differently. And I'm not saying that's selfish. That's not my approach. As you said, right? People were set in their ways. They didn't like new ideas. This was the way we did it. This is why we do that. Phantom Menace behind the scenes is a great demo of that, when he's like, just basically like, take that guy and move him there in post. And they're sat there like, this is evil. You can't do this. And he's sat there like, right, much better, thank you. It's kind of like a second way to direct.
Yeah.
Lucas did it for the accessibility of how he wants to make his films.
Mm.
And I don't think what is known after is that has made filmmaking easier for everybody ever in every generation since. We are more accessible to get software, to get cameras, to edit, to make films. I know they waffle about 28 years later on an iPhone. Okay, look at the iPhones, guys. They've still got lens like tens of thousands of pounds on the end of an iPhone. But the logic is there. It changed filmmaking. And for animation, and animation isn't my strongest suit of knowledge, and there's certainly not studios that I'm grey in the air of not knowing their work. To then make computer animation, someone would be like, "Oh yeah, it was going to happen eventually," but it didn't until it was Toy Story, until it was Pixar, and a lot of the other studios did follow on, and we've got new studios since that have done computer animation. But there is nothing in comparison to this, and I think the reason Pixar stands on its own is because of the storytelling in the films that they have gone on to make, and with Toy Story, certainly. The concept was originally going to be the short film was going to become a feature-length film. And whilst they're in the writing stages, the production stages, that's when it evolved into the Toy Story we became. So the stories are is that Woody was this horrible, absurdist, unlikable character. The toys were all very adult-orientated, adult-themed. And apparently it was essentially a train wreck. And they did a production shutdown. And they started rewriting the scripts. The writers came on board, including Joss Whedon. Yes, that Joss Whedon. And they would be involved in shaping it into the Toy Story that's now, where they were more likable characters. It was more of a story. It was more, I'm not going to say family orientated, but you couldn't have showed it to kids before, and Disney would have never allowed that to be released in its original version. So the right behind the scenes changes were made. John Lasseter was at the front of that. And then without jumping too far ahead, like it's all easy, Toy Story would obviously be made and released and to go on to be, I would argue one of the most important films ever made. And it's not just because it was the first computer animated, it is every single thing that comes together to put this film in this way. And I've got a statistic somewhere. Here we go. It was on the IMDb trivia. The film required 800,000 machine hours, 100,014 frames of animation, divided between 1,500 shots, and that totaled over 77 minutes. And they could only render less than 30 seconds of film a day. Now, I know I've just summarised the last couple of years in the lead up to it, but we could look at that today as quite alien, that we could all do some animation at home. Yeah. And this is the mid-90s. The technology doesn't exist outside of these studios. It's new. It's not accessible. But here we are. And that leads to finished product. That's not us talking about casts, the story, the direction. That is the making and the behind the scenes of that. I don't even know how we move on and segue from this part. Can you suggest it?
Not really. In all fairness, but it is. I think going off of what you said a minute ago, I just wanted to add as well. Like, if Pixar hadn't been a thing and Toy Story hadn't come out in the 90s, there is a part of my brain that's thinking, how long would it have taken for someone to then eventually make that first leap into CG animation and then be the Toy Story of that generation? It's got me thinking about like how long that would have taken if the events we just discussed hadn't have played out.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got a live-action Toy Story to an extent with Small Soldiers, but that's obviously a very different film. I've got no idea. That's just hit me. I wonder if Small Soldiers was in production before Toy Story released. That would be very interesting to research that one day. If it is, that's unlucky. I'm assuming they saw Toy Story was like, great, let's do it in live action, and that's what Small Soldiers became. Very different conversation, very different film. No, you are right. It does ask the question, who could have done it and when would it have been done? And I think the fact it was ultimately Toy Story first is essential because, as I said at the beginning, it is almost a universal story. That, not in the concept of, people say about Avatar, you can put it in any language, it's fine. Not even in that way. But the mechanisms of it being about the toys of your childhood, the toys on their own adventure, growing up with favourite toys without them, without even getting into the deep family elements which people have assumed or discovered or prophesized over the years.
Mm.
it really just feel like anyone would have gone through this cycle in their life.
Mm.
And I guess if we start talking about the direction, whilst we spoke up behind the scenes, John Lasseter as the director,
Mm.
this being an idea from his youth that what if his toys could talk when he wasn't
Mm.
there?
Mm.
Me and you were kind of got a bit of a red flag here. We've thought that as kids, right?
Mm.
But this film was out.
Yeah.
So, not that it invalidates our thoughts,
Mm.
but I'm assuming the generation above us, this is a better way of saying it, probably had all at one point then I've thought, what happened to the Toys movie if I'm not in the room?
Mm.
And the fact that would go on to be a film, a series, a phenomenon elsewhere
Mm.
is crazy. And yet it's such a simple premise that makes that work. And I'm not
Mm.
underselling it by calling it a simple premise.
Mm.
It's a fantastic idea for them to elaborate and make a film off, which
Mm.
is what Lester did. And I
Mm.
have to give credit to him for that. And I think what makes it work so much better, it's not even a generational age change with someone like Andy. We get that in Toy Story 3. It literally just is kid's seen a new film at a cinema and gets a new toy. He's just got a new favourite toy.
Yeah.
What's the knock-on effect of that?
Mm.
And I think the reason why it works so well is because the film not goes out of its way, but we see this the toy civilization. This sounds weird. I thought we said that about Toy Story. The opening few scenes, you're
Mm.
seeing everything set up. The imagination of a kid. The opening scene. You're then seeing the toys have their own societal hierarchy within.
Yeah.
Prepping for the birthday party, where they're all feared they could all be replaced at any moment.
Mm.
All of that builds and builds and builds because it could have just been about toys being there with no one else there, but
Yeah.
to make it more intimidating, you need another idea. And I think the concepts, and maybe Toy Story 2 will elaborate on this a lot more, of the cowboy western from the 50s, okay, we know that thanks to Toy Story 2, being replaced by sci-fi space figure from the 60s,
Mm.
that kind of did happen, right? You had the
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood films, you had the moon landing, you had your Star Wars. It was a societal shift that did happen. Westerns did kind of get replaced by science fiction. And I just think it's really interesting in the mid 90s to kind of put this in the
Mm.
story as well, to put this on screen. And it gives some of the great sequences of the film. We'll talk about music later, but I had a Thomas the Tank Engine bedroom at the age of 3. That got
Mm.
replaced by Star Wars.
Mm.
Like that happened. It happens to everyone as a child, and I just think I
Mm.
know that sounds like I'm waffling about themes. The direction sort of starts. That it really has to talk about direction. Is because it's the first
Mm.
film. Everything sort
Yeah.
of blends into the behind the scenes of me, so it's actually a lot harder to
Mm.
talk about. But what works for you best in terms of those themes, the story elements of the direction?
Well, one thing that you mentioned, which has been one thing I've really appreciated, not just about this, but every Toy Story film since, is that cultural thing of like just how the toys work as like, as I guess as you put it, civilization, but just like little mundane things in terms of like fundamentally, obviously an etch a sketch is very different to a doll, and then the toy soldiers are very limited in terms of their movement. It's just little mundane, little tiny things like that in terms of not necessarily how they work as a whole, but how that individual toy operates as a living thing always has fascinated me. And it's, I guess one could word it as quirky, but like it just makes it that much more believable. Like the fact that I suppose this is my brain working into overdrive here. It's like the fact, take the speak and spell, for example. It still operates like a speak and spell. It doesn't do like a Transformers thing and turn into a new thing entirely for the sake of it to interact with Woody and Buzz. It still operates like a speak and spell. On the Etch-a-Sketch still operates like an Etch-a-Sketch, and the toy soldiers still have to waddle back and forth because they're limited to a thing. It's little fundamental things like that that I took for granted as a kid, but now looking back at it, I'm just like, it's very simple, but, and again, you take it for granted now, but for me, it's little details like that, and you see other things like that throughout the series that really show the attention to detail in terms of like, okay, we want to include this sort of toy. What are the limitations of it, and how can we make that work, even if it's for like a visual joke, or like a story purpose or just a one-off thing in a scene? How do we make those elements work? And that kind of goes into another thing I wanted to add, which was the animation itself. Some people I know of a younger generation now look back at it and go, oh, because it's the first computer animated film, the animation doesn't look as good as something we get now. And rewatching it for the sake of this review, I actually beg to differ, because yes, some of the models look a bit dated, like the dog in the bully kid's house, Sid's house,
Yeah.
has not aged the best when like polygons are poking out of his shoulder blades. But it's one of those things where like, and it just kind of proves how much like render time and how many computers they used for it. But really minute little details like the the dirt and the way the pen is rubbed off on the bottom of Woody's shoe, the reflections in Buzz's helmet, like all those little details that probably took hours to render, that again
Yeah.
we take for granted because things have come so far nowadays and Pixar films look detailed and extravagant now. Back then on the first one, they could have kept it very simple, very plain, very primitive, and it still would have got the job done. But the fact that they went above and beyond to add those really detailed things like reflections and like dirt and scratch marks and stuff like that just kind of again proves that they were really putting everything into this first film, and it really shows, because story wise still holds up, animation wise though some elements are dated, genuinely still holds up as well.
I fully agree, and I was going to jump on that. So something that threw me last night, I was watching it on the Blu-ray.
Yep.
I don't have it in 4K. And also, it's worth mentioning, this is one of those rare films. It's got a VHS release, a DVD release, a Blu-ray release, a Blu-ray 3D release, and a 4K UHD release. So it's got your covering all home media. So I have an upscaler built into my 4K Blu-ray player. So I'm watching a normal Blu-ray for anyone that's into the sort of tech side. But it upscales into 4K, which I basically just say, it's like in between 1080p and 4K, but it's not proper 4K. That's to me what that means. I know someone somewhere has got a scientific explanation. I was gobsmacked when I could see the reflections on the wooden floor of characters in his bedroom, and I was just sat there like, this was made in 1995. I have seen people saying it's dated animation. This is not dated animation at all. Clearly, this is a whole other conversation. People are stuck on that. Oh, when I watch a compressed image on YouTube on a phone, that details apparently what a film is, which it just doesn't. And I was just sat there like, my PS5 has to pick between a reflection in a goddamn mirror or a higher frame rate. And this film is doing reflections in the mid-90s on the floor that didn't need to be done, but it enhances it. And I'm sat there like, should I buy a 4K now? Because what more am I going to find that you wouldn't see on a VHS or compressed on YouTube?
You know what? On a rewatch, I think it was also the reflections on the floor that made me pick up on that as well.
Yes.
Because like I was always kind of subliminally aware of like, oh, you can see Woody's, the bit where he goes hello and introduces himself. You can always see Woody's reflection in Buzz's helmet. But it was the floor that, out of all the things, it was the wooden floor reflections that made me pick up on it a bit more. And then I noticed like the added detail on the bottom of Woody's shoe, and bits and pieces like that probably I wouldn't. Again, you just kind of take for granted because it's always kind of been there. But now watching it specifically for the sake of this review, you kind of are especially from probably your and mine perspective, we're just astonished by the fact that they got that on the first go and went out of their way to put those details in.
Yeah, I know, I agree. And I think what's worth mentioning, what you said too, you mentioned animation on the dog, I know on the humans as well. This is the infancy of the new animation. And it's quite genius. And then you can go to the next few films, really. Toy Story 2 obviously got a bit more humans because obviously you got Alice Toy Barn, all that sort of stuff. And obviously then you really have Finding Nemo, a little bit of Monsters, Inc. The limitations of the technology works in the favour of, great, we're going to do toys because maybe they're plastic, they're smaller, they're less layered. They are not human. And
Mm.
there was always the uncanny valley of humans with Pixar, and it took them a couple
Mm.
of decades, I'd say, to get their humans to not like an acceptable level. That's ridiculous, but
Mm.
Pixar should never ever try and be like a replica of humans. That's always been my belief, and I know the studio themselves probably run that by. Even though they
Mm.
probably could do the most lifelike human ever, they
Mm.
know it would just not work for how their animation has been.
Yeah.
But with a focus on like bugs, toys, monsters, fish,
Mm.
where we're going with that, they were able in the background to develop the humans into certainly the probably standards they wanted as a studio.
Yeah.
And I just think again, yeah, the dog, it might show its age now, but it's how many scenes is the dog in? 2, 3 scenes, if that, and
Mm.
it doesn't. It still looks great, and
Mm.
it's still remarkable. And the humans are very selective. I don't think you see anyone with hair longer than shoulder length
Mm.
in the first film, at least. So the animation to me holds up as it ever has. And actually, as you said,
Mm.
given what we've seen online over the years, and I don't think people like shit on it. I don't think it's
Yeah.
they're just dissing it. I think people are legitimately saying, wow, this maybe hasn't aged. I just don't think they've realised that it has been very well looked after and it has aged
Yeah.
very well. They're probably just seeing it a different way. And I think that's why we've
Mm.
both had that moment with the floor where I remember in Star Wars Rebels when they did footprints in the snow. And I was
Mm.
like, oh my God, the animation level has footprints in the snow. And I'm sat there like,
Mm.
yeah, that was mega in the mid tens. But I'm
Mm.
also sat there in Toy Story like, they've got reflections on the wooden floors. Like,
Mm.
I know it's stupid, but it does have a big part of this. And Monsters
Yeah.
Inc.'s going to have the third discussion, which sounds very weird to say out loud. But I know that when they had to render Sully, that was like
Yeah.
insane.
Mm.
But yeah, the animation, as we both sort of spoke about, and I guess something we haven't talked about, which we'll get into now. Um, we haven't spoken about the characters, which is quite remarkable. We've got 45 minutes in, and we're getting to
Mm.
characters. This is great. This means it's not going to be too short, this video, and it's not going to be 3 hours long either. Um, we've again the first episode, the first details. We spoke about the animation, the sort of toys, but we haven't spoken about the actual characters themselves, all their stories, all the voices behind them.
Mm.
Obviously, we've got Woody and Buzz, the two leads, played by Tom Hanks and Tim Allen.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to begin this debate. It's not even a debate, sorry. Two of the most iconic characters in modern cinema.
Yeah.
Who I've very difficultly on the thumbnail, right? So if you look at the theatrical poster for Toy Story, Woody is frowning as Buzz is pulling him up. And they edited that, I think, for either the VHS or DVD to have Woody smiling.
I
And I
think
know
it
the
was the
original.
VHS. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think because obviously they did begin as, rivals,
Mm.
within one film, obviously they are friends without jumping too far into character development. But it's amazing that everything after has basically got rid of the frowning Woody because they are so known as friends. And I just thought it was really interesting that the thumbnail I've had to put him smiling because I couldn't get a high-res photo of him frowning. But it's like not like they've eradicated it in a bad way. I just think because it's so iconic, their relationship and them two as the toys, that it sort of is funny. I just wanted to bring that up, but I'm just going to say this. Tom Hanks is Woody, vice versa. He was the first choice. He's who they wanted to play him. I think, no, it was Buzz, where I will talk about Buzz after, but I very rarely say, oh, this was perfectly cast. And I know that some people frown upon A-listers playing animated characters, which I feel there is certainly should be a discussion about in this day and age.
Yeah.
People say that actors steal jobs from voice actors. I don't disagree, but I think when it's the protagonists, I certainly am a bit more open. Obviously, you got to think they're following on from Aladdin, which did change voice acting with Robin Williams, but no one else could have ever voiced Woody, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think any actor on the planet could have done this the way Tom Hanks did. And it's not only the fact it's the gravitas of Tom Hanks, the contextual, his run in the 90s to then go and do an animated film. And it's kind of the only franchise, can we say, he's ever done that he's so intrinsically linked to. And you wouldn't think for someone of Tom Hanks' stature he'd keep coming back, but he always does. And I feel that I hate the word camaraderie. I feel that it is there with Toy Story. Like, he looks upon it as his thing. And I'm so glad he took this on, because for an actor, sure, voice work, you go to the, I forgot his name, the voice of Megatron, the film Megatron, Matrix, you know who I mean?
Yes, I know who you mean. I just can't remember his name. Hugo Weaving?
Um, that's it. Hugo Weaving, who's like, yeah, I did 2 hours of work, got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Great, haha.
Mm.
That sort of does shit on it, but Tom Hanks clearly is there for the character, for the
Yeah.
story, when he didn't need to be, and I love him for it. I
Mm.
think it is in this first film against the typical Tom Hanks performance that I'll be honest, I've always hated Woody. I'm
Mm.
Team Buzz. Not that that's a team faction anymore, but
Mm.
I've always preferred Buzz Lightyear to Woody. Maybe it's the sci-fi over westerns thing,
Mm.
but I think Tom Hanks can do the groveling. He can do the jealousy. He can do the
Mm.
team leader type role. He
Mm.
ticks every box possible for Woody in this, and I think the voice performance is superb in this. For all of them, we'll go through a
Mm.
couple of others, but certainly for Woody, he is iconic in his own right.
Yeah. No, I pretty much will echo everything you've said. I think there is definitely something to be said about, especially going back to the early drafts of not just the
Mhm.
story, like with the storyboards, but I think also the way he was characterized. A lot of that pettiness is still there. Like in the original storyboards, it was a lot more mean spirited, to the point where the scene where he accidentally knocks Buzz out the window. This is the only one that really crops into my mind, but the scene where he accidentally knocks Buzz out the window, in the original script, he knocks him out the window on purpose, and the other toys just kind of go out for blood and push him out of the window because of what he's done. And I like the fact that some of that pettiness is still there. Obviously, it's toned down a lot, and I think
Yeah.
it's a good thing that they did and made him a bit more sympathetic. But I totally agree. I cannot personally hear anyone other than Tom Hanks voicing Woody, even as far to say that, like, I think in like he's even said in interviews that for video games and other properties where they want to use Woody, it's his brother voicing him because he sounds
Yeah,
so much like Tom, and I'm like, that just makes so much sense. I think the big one that comes into my mind is Kingdom Hearts 3, where you can slightly tell it's someone else voicing him, but it still mostly feels and sounds like Tom Hanks. But I think that is one thing going on the debate of like getting a famous person to voice a role. I think that's become more of an issue in the 2000s going into the 2010s. I think
yes,
the big one that became a massive issue was, I guess, the big one in my head is Shark Tale, because they went so out of their way to cast Will Smith and then have the creatures look like the actor they're portraying, which is where I think the line can kind of be drawn a little bit. Whereas with Pixar, they are very good at picking a voice that fits the character and not the other way around, where it's like, oh, we're just doing the DreamWorks or Illumination thing, where we're just going to pick a popular name because they're popular, and then we'll worry about the character afterwards. That's sometimes what it feels like coming from those other studios, whereas I feel like Pixar are very consistent at picking either a popular star because it fits the role they're looking for, or they pick names that are like not necessarily the first choice. Like, I guess, for example, having recently watched Poltergeist for the first time and then thinking back to The Incredibles, the fact that you got Craig T. Nelson as the dad in Poltergeist, hearing his voice, the first thing I think of is Mr. Incredible, and that kind of kept taking me out of the film. But that is a good example of like them picking not necessarily the first choice. They nowadays that role would probably be filled by someone like, I don't know, a name escapes me. They
I
would probably go for like a
I don't mean to diss Lightyear, but it was like Taika Waititi gets like a very secondary irrelevant character, and it's Taika Waititi because it's Taika Waititi, and I
yeah,
think that's when that debate to me jumps in. Certainly, as you said, right in the
yeah,
noughties onwards, where it did become here's like a one scene character, 10 minutes
mm,
work in a studio for a day, and it just
yeah.
becomes a Hollywood type that I think
It's
should be a voice actor.
Yeah, it's very much the Chris Pratt as Mario sort of thing, where
Yeah,
it's like you could have actually gotten like someone to voice Mario that can do a very good impression of Mario, or the guy himself who is I'm pretty sure is still alive, but they
it
went
was
for
just
Chris Pratt because he's
Chris Pratt
Chris
being
Pratt.
Chris Pratt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I'm with you. And
it's a weird one because like Chris Pratt worked for something like the Lego Movie because he wasn't as well
yeah,
known then, and at the time he was more known for comedy, and his comedy ability worked for that role because he was Emmett's naive and that sort of thing. But for something like Super Mario Bros, it's like we're just going to choose Chris Pratt because he's Chris Pratt. Whereas in the '90s, Tim Allen and Tom Hanks are both like almost at the peak of their they're on a hot streak, so it makes sense. But also they just work too well for these characters. And again, I can't really imagine it any other way. Even when they get someone like Owen Wilson for Cars, they don't make the car look like Owen Wilson. It just
yeah.
happens that his voice just works for that character.
I feel with Pixar, and this is a really weird statement to make, sometimes the characters feel like extensions of the actors. And that's like a
Yeah,
compliment. That it's like, yeah, like Tom Allen, sorry, not Tom Allen. The Tom Hanks is Woody, and with
yeah,
Tim Allen, oh god, I didn't mean to bring Lightyear again, but there will be, I guess, in that video, a hefty discussion on
mm,
the Tim Allen debacle, which is again, right, what we just said. Chris Evans voiced Buzz Lightyear because it's Captain America. They wanted
yeah,
Captain America to voice him, and that's a separate discussion. But the role of Buzz was not as simple as the role of Woody in terms of the people they wanted.
mm,
It is known there are a lot of names. I'm not
yeah,
just reading Wikipedia, by the way, historically of interviews. Tim Allen was cast,
yeah,
and before he was cast, there are the two big names that everyone knows passed on it. Chevy Chase was the first one, and the reason it's known that he passed on it was because, I mean, bullet dodged, if I'm allowed to say so
yeah,
myself.
yeah.
Tim Allen said that Chevy Chase was his idol, so he was delighted to take a role that Chase rejected.
Mm,
Don't know how complimentary of yourself that is, but he probably said it in a much better term. And the Billy Crystal was the original first choice,
mm,
and he didn't take it.
mm,
He turned it down, and apparently it's the biggest regret of his life. And the moment
mm,
they rang him for Monsters Inc., well, it wasn't even Monsters Inc. at that point. The moment they rang him saying it's Pixar, would you like to do something? It was a yes.
mm,
And I am going to say this, and I love Billy Crystal, and I'm not
mm.
saying it because we're here 30 years later. Thank God he is Mike Wazowski and not Buzz Lightyear, because
Yeah,
I can't picture either one of those roles without who they went for.
yeah,
Which is the beauty of filmmaking, is that happens a lot. We
mm,
almost had Christopher Walken as Han Solo once, so that's where those conversations go at times. But I love the voice cast in this. I know,
mm,
again, there's so many names. I think Jim Carrey was thrown around context mid-90s. Jim Carrey's Buzz Lightyear, it wouldn't
mm,
have worked, but Jim Carrey's 90s run is, I think, the greatest run a comedian's ever had in cinema.
mm. Yeah,
He couldn't have been. Do you know who he could have been? He could have been Sid, but he couldn't have been Buzz Lightyear.
yeah.
Um,
I can see him working as Rex as well for some reason.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, that's it. And this is it. And I love this because whilst you have two massive names of Tim Allen and
mm,
Tom Hanks as Woody and Buzz, a couple of the others, which we'll talk about because some of these would go on to obviously have massive, not careers within Pixar, some would, of course.
mm,
Don Rickles, cinema legend as Mr. Potato Head, who,
yes,
by the way, Mr. Potato Head in this, do you
mm,
know the theory? Um, the reason Mr. Potato Head is so cynical
mm.
is that he was the original favorite toy until he got Woody. Did you know that? That's a theory that exists.
That makes so much sense because there's just snide comments that he makes because of how Woody's reacting. That makes so much sense now. But I've never thought of that. That
I
actually makes
thought,
so much sense.
and this is why I love Pixar. I know there is the Pixar theory. I don't know how that's going on in
Yeah.
the year 2025, but I remember like 15 years ago, it was like the most insane thing ever.
Mm,
Yeah, the Mr. Potato Head theory, I think that was legit. And I guess the other second
yeah.
big theory is they all think Andy's mom's just divorced from his dad, which is why the dad's
Mm,
never seen him mentioned in their moving house. Bit deeper,
yeah.
that one. But I love that people can read different things. But yeah, the Mr. Potato Head one's crazy. And I've got to
Mm,
say, Mr. Potato Head, he's got my favourite joke of the
mm.
entire film. It's the "Hey, I'm Picasso,
Yeah.
you uncultured swine," because
Swine.
it's a double insult. It's calling him uncultured, number one,
Mm,
and calling the pig money bank swine as number two. It
mm.
took me years to realise that the swine point was because it's a pig. I just
Yeah.
thought it's best insults ever. But again, right, that's one of those. It's not massively an adult joke, but kids
Mm.
aren't going to understand the Picasso thing. Like, they're not going to
No.
understand the spine thing. And I love Mr. Potato. I love all these characters, and I think what you said earlier, right? The toys work because they're so different.
Mm.
We get the army men, which is great because buckets of soldiers were real, but
Yeah.
every single toy is different. He
Yeah.
doesn't have like the same 10 figures. And Toy Story 2 is able to develop that more with like franchises within Toy Story, i.e.,
Yeah.
Woody's round up the gang and the group. But I love that everything's so different from one another that we have someone like Mr.
Mm.
Potato Head. We have Ham,
Mm.
voiced by John Ratzenberger, who has obviously had a role in every single Pixar film to date, which is just
That's
remarkable.
mad. Yeah.
And another wild story that people don't know, John Ratzenberger is also in The Empire Strikes Back. Here's one of the soldiers in Hoth, which is something I've always loved. So, yes, absolutely have to talk about him very briefly. I also want to talk about Wallace Shawn, who plays
Yep.
Rex, who is one of my favourites in this. Love the character of Rex. I love the fact it's a T-Rex, and it's basically just nervous, afraid. It's so against T-Rex type that, again, it's this simple ideology. Let's take a T-Rex and not make him scary. You can't do that in live action, but you can do that in Toy Story.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Jim Varney as Slinky, who would obviously only voice him in the first films. I'm unfamiliar with his work outside of Toy Story, I guess because of the age we were when he passed away. But I remember when Toy Story 3 came out, it was a huge thing that they had to get a new voice actor for Slinky. Would he be up to standard, etc., etc.?
Yeah.
I never noticed much of a difference when I was younger.
Mm.
And I wanted to very quickly, before I hand over to you, talk about Annie Potts as Bo Peep, which I love. I thought the casting works so well. And I like that she got her due a couple of films later, which I know some people dislike. I understand that criticism, but I do like what they went with that. But I liked her as a voice actor. And this, again, comedy back. There's a lot of comedic backgrounds. And I'm sat there like, well, they had comedic roles, great. I'd rather, again, it wasn't... If you've gone for your A-listers as the lead too, fill the supporting roles in with supporting actors. I don't mind that. I think it works.
I think, actually, you mentioning that, I feel like that's something they also do a good job carrying over into the sequels. Like, you get Joan Cusack in 2. She's very known for like comedic roles, as well as Kelsey Grammer, who I suppose at the time was only really known for Frasier as like the big thing. And then in the third one, I'm trying to remember who voices Lotso.
What's his name? He passed away a couple of years ago, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think it was like a very typical British... Was it like a British acting legend? I could be wrong. Oh, dear, that's throwing me.
Yeah, my brain is not...
I know you could say the biggest name in modern Toy Story. That sounds so weird to say. Sorry, it was Ned Beatty that played Lotso Huggen Bear. The biggest name they've added to Toy Story is Keanu Reeves.
Yes.
And I'm fully in defense of that because he is a comedic supporting character.
Yep.
He is fantastic. I know it's a different review, but that is one of the few ones where they took, post John Wick Keanu Reeves, we have to really clarify too.
Yeah.
And it is another instant iconic role with an incredible backstory, very funny. And that I think that's Keanu against type of John Wick. Whilst playing the stuntsman, it makes sense for John Wick to be the stuntsman. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I completely get what you mean, because like he kind of had developed a thing at the time of like the guy who does his own stunts in the John Wick films. But going back to the characters in this film, like I can't, again, going back to like Tom Hanks and Tim Allen, I can't quite imagine other voices fitting with these characters. Like I think the one that is like a stroke of genius is getting Ali Ermey to voice the toy soldier captain. Like that is perfect. And again, going even further back to like the details of like the animation, one thing I never noticed before, and I don't know why I didn't notice this, is like I think when the soldiers are coming out of the tub for the first time, I noticed like the bit of plastic on the back of the soldier where like the mold hadn't fully like been cut properly, which you get on any
Yeah.
typical green toy soldier back in the day, where there's just like this really odd bit of plastic circle just sticking out the back of them. A really little detail that I just absolutely loved, and I don't know why I never noticed it. But again, I love the voice, the voice acting choices they've gone for this film. I think most Pixar films, I think they nail the voice cast. This is just like the perfect one to start with. Even the human characters, again, they're not like the focus and they're not on screen for that long, but even they're fine. But I think, yeah, I don't really have much else to add on top of what you've already said, but I think they all do a brilliant job. And again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, the fact that like they are synonymous with these roles, so that for expanded media like games and TV shows, or future sequels, they just get people to sound like as close to them as possible because they're so synonymous with these roles. I think the only time they've gotten a voice actor that's slightly different was that Buzz Lightyear Star Command animated series where
Yes.
Patrick Warburton voiced him. That's like the only time I can remember of them going for something different. But I suppose tonally he can give that same thing off. But even then, for the most part, these voices are synonymous with these roles, and I suppose that's another thing we'll get onto in a bit as well. But like the some of the lines they come out with are genuinely hilarious to this day. Even the adult jokes or the other jokes, they're just brilliant.
Yeah, I really want to talk about. I really want to quickly talk about Sid just before we run
Yeah,
out characters because he's the antagonist.
yeah,
Childhood, normal kid, Andy, not the
mm,
protagonist, but he's the owner of the toys. A kid with an imaginative, wants to play with the toys as he want. I love in the
yeah,
first one, the concept is right now. Let's take another kid who is just a psychopath. And the thing is, right, he's a
yeah,
psychopath to toys, but we all knew someone like Sid who had a
yeah,
dog, and we all there's loads of reports on Sid. His dad was a drunk because there was beer cans. He was probably abused. Blah blah blah. He's a victim of his environment. He's got the shining carpet in his house. Okay, that is insane.
yeah,
But and I love that detail as well. The fact that he's strapping fireworks to his toys. I think there's a
yeah,
combat Carl who eventually becomes Carl Weathers, which is great. Um, I love that would happen. Like there were kids that played with their toys in like insane ways. We've probably all broken
yeah,
some toys before by playing with them, and I love that they take that logic of making him the villain. And I love Sid in this. I love his. We'll
mm,
talk about the score in a minute, but I just think it works so well that the first film, the villain is kind of just a kid with a different imagination,
yeah,
and then you've villain for the second film is okay. There's other villains, but the second one is the logic of collectors within the toy industry, which is a different conversation. Which again, with toys, they should all be part of that conversation, and the franchise delivers
mm,
on that. Um,
yeah,
but we're moving very quickly from Sid just because I wanted to bring him up very briefly.
yeah, yeah,
We've got to talk about another key component of this, which we'll bring up in every review of the franchise, which is the score.
yeah,
This is Randy Newman who composes this. He
yeah,
also wrote the songs. This is the first of 9 Pixar films that he would do the soundtrack on.
mm,
Now, I do not know if they've said if he will do Toy Story 5. That's a question I guess we'll find out in the coming months. I know he did Toy Story 4. I don't know if
yeah,
he's retired or if he might do one more in him. Um, Hands down, one of the most iconic
mm,
scores to a film ever made.
yeah,
Whether it be the songs, including one of the most iconic songs ever made on the film, but the actual score as well, the soundtrack, I don't think is spoken about enough.
yeah,
I think it perfectly gets the balance of the excitement with kids, the wonder of an imagination, the wonder of toys. It gets the devilish stuff right. And I don't want to sound a bit
yeah,
too much, but a film like this, it doesn't need a John Williams or a Hans Zimmer. It
yeah.
just needs someone with a completely different approach. And Randy Newman is just so perfectly involved. I couldn't imagine Toy Story without him. It
No,
feels that strong a connection. It feels like John Williams to Star Wars.
yeah,
That is him and his.
yeah,
This is Randy Newman's. Good luck to whoever might want to do it after him,
mm,
but Randy Newman can do it until he doesn't want to do it.
mm,
I think it's incredible. It's one of my
mm,
favorite soundtracks ever. Um, and my controversial opinion is that I think Stranger Things is an absolute banger. Not the
Yeah.
series, I do like that. Just to clarify, the song.
Mm.
It's just so fucking good. I don't know if
Mm.
it's his voice or the instruments he's using, but I
Mm.
just, I cried at the start of Toy Story 4 when they start playing Got a Friend in Me. Like, I'm going
Mm.
to be a mess during Toy Story 5 if it's anything like how 4 opened.
Yeah, it's. I guess the best way to describe his score for this film, and I guess some of the others that he did for Pixar, but most specifically this one, is that it is playful. And I think for a
Yes.
film about toys, it needs to be not whimsical, not fantastical, not horrific. It needs to be playful to match that sort of light tone
Yeah.
that this film goes for. Like you said, even the songs of him where he's singing don't feel out of place. Whereas sometimes um, films can like just shoehorn a song in there from the soundtrack, and it just feels a bit. This was like a '90s, 2000s issue where they just like shoehorn a song into like an emotional moment, and it feels a bit out of place. Here, because he's the one writing the songs as well as the score, it just kind of naturally progresses from one to the other, and it just works, even to its detriment at some times where like I will watch something else that's not Disney that he's done the score for. The main example coming into my head is Marriage Story,
Yeah.
where there are points in the score where I'm just thinking it's going a bit Toy Story now, which isn't a detriment to this film. It's more of a detriment to like sometimes Randy Newman stuff can sound very similar, but he's got a style and it works for specific films like Toy Story and even Monsters Inc., which I think that's even just as iconic now to this day.
Marriage Story, without tentative
Yeah,
review, I remember watching that at London Film Festival 2019, and it was like Randy Newman, and I was
yeah,
like, Toy Story Randy Newman, and I was like, oh, those monsters! Like they so intentionally, like it was so surreal that he did that film, and it felt
mm,
like on purpose. Like let's bring the guy that's so joyful and playful, chuck him on
mm,
the divorce film. Um, like I think it was intentional, like
yeah,
in a lovely way, because I was sat there
mm,
like, God, this sounds a bit like Toy Story, doesn't it? And I was like, I get it now. It was just the horror of marriage, and is in that film's marriage. But his score's just amazing, and kind of
yeah,
sticking with that. Let's talk briefly on the Oscars because this
hmm,
would get 3 Oscar nominations, and for Randy Newman, he'd be nominated for Best Original Score, he'd be nominated for Best Song for "You've Got a Friend in Me,"
yeah,
and then the film would also be nominated for Best Original Screenplay. I believe the first ever animated film to get an original screenplay nomination, which is very
mm,
impressive. And I'm going to put you on the spot because you probably should know the answer to this because I found out
oh
last
god,
night. You know my
okay,
animation image is limited. What
mm.
film do you think it lost Best Music and Song to?
Oh god, I'm trying to think of films that came out in 1995.
I made a clue. I made a very brief clue because I said you know animation. It's fine if you don't know, by the way. It's just to prove I did a bit of research because
um,
I like getting angry when I look back at the Oscars, and sometimes like I can't actually moan about that one.
I'm guessing it probably went to something like GoldenEye or Casper,
No,
maybe.
Pocahontas on both score and song.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I
It's
can.
fair,
Yeah,
isn't it? Like, because I was sat like, what on earth would beat You've Got a Friend in Me? I was so angry. Um,
yeah,
I shouldn't have been. And obviously, I was like, yeah, I can't really complain. Colours of the Wind, like especially contextually mid 90s as well.
mm,
And there was no animation Oscar until
no,
2002, so this was the second animated film to ever be given a special achievement Oscar win.
mm,
Just on the fact it was the first ever computer animated film. I'm so getting the
yeah,
CGI mixed up, and I quite like it when the Oscars and they don't do the special achievement Oscars often. Very, very rarely do they do
mm,
them. But obviously, they would make it into its own Oscar in 2002, which I guess we'll be talking about in the majority of Pixar reviews over the coming months. Any
yeah.
surprises there for the Oscars, or is that understandable for you?
Considering the context at the time and that an animated Oscar didn't exist, I think all of those are valid. Like, screenplay is really good. Again, not just the fact that it's an original idea and it's one that probably everyone's thought of at one point, but the fact that everything within the story is handled as well as it is. And again, music and song just makes sense. Like again, like we've raved about Randy Newman's music for this. It just makes so much sense.
Fully agree as well. And we'll talk box office briefly, as we will do with every one of these. This would
Mm-hmm.
gross 401 million off a $30 million budget. Very successful.
Yep.
But contextually, in '95, it made 360 million. It was the
Mm-hmm.
second biggest film of the year behind Die Hard 3, which is clearly testament to its scale. And in various re-releases over the decades, it would gross another 40 to put it over 400 million. For anyone
Mm-hmm.
curious, it had a 3D re-release at cinemas. It would then have part of the Disney 100, a small re-release, and it had a very small re-release now. So obviously it's racked up quite a lot. I think the 3D re-releases were very popular, as in it felt
Yeah.
like in the early tens. And I don't mind saying this, animated films looked gorgeous in 3D because
Mm.
with the layers and the environments, they actually lended themselves to 3D projectors.
Yeah.
So I'll defend that on a couple of the ones I did see in 3D.
Mm.
2D animation is even more surreal in a great way because you get obviously the environments pulling forward. But yes, they're obviously big hits on those released at home media in those formats. Um, and then I guess where we start to slowly even things out before we get to our final thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite scene or scenes you want to talk about very briefly, or something we've not spoke about?
I think. I mean, my favorite scene kind of. This is weird because I have favorite scenes for other Pixar films that I can just say off the top of my head. But with the original Toy Story, it kind of bounces between a few specific ones. I think the main one, though, and probably the big one that everyone goes to, is the toys kind of scaring the ever living Christ out of Sid in the back garden, just because it's leaning into that like sadistic pettiness that the original script had, just for a little bit, but not going like full blown into it. And I just love the fact that they didn't save that for a sequel; they just did that straight out the gate. Um, yeah, I just love how it turns into a horror movie for like 2 minutes. I love it. It's it's funny. It's yeah. I don't know. It's just something about him getting his comeuppance as well that just really works. And one thing I was going to add while we were when you were talking about Sid is that like that whole thing of different kids and the different ways in which they play with their toys. It's not just something unique to Toy Story. It's even something that like The first thing that came to my head was Barbie with Weird Barbie. Is the fact that like even that's kind of taken that
Yeah.
approach and gone like, yeah, everyone plays with their toys slightly differently. You've got like the ones who keep it in pristine packaging, which obviously Toy Story 2 delves into. You got the ones who just play with it normally, and then you've got ones who like Frankenstein their toys together and mess them up and, make them all weird. Um, so yeah, that was just something I wanted to add, is that like that's something that I like the fact that it's kind of remained consistent in not pop culture, but just like something that everyone always knows that like, yeah, there was that one kid that kind of messed their toys up a little bit. But yeah, that is probably my favorite scene, is the back garden scene.
That's fair. Oh god, I don't even know where to start. I can't say the whole film, but I adore Pizza Planet.
Yeah.
It is my dream that I know it doesn't even exist at any of the Disneys anymore, or there's a Pizza Planet something which just looks nothing like it that I
Mm,
could one day get one. It's not going to happen, but I love the Pizza Planet sequence, particularly to see the aliens, the claw. I love the
mm,
perspective that we've been chosen. Like I love that idea, like the toys waiting to be picked to be played with. I love it. I love it.
yeah.
And I brain rot has ruined the final scene, not the final scene, the rocket. I can't really talk about that scene anymore because a certain historic event, which you all know, has become the social media phenomenon for that scene. So I know I've derailed this video
Okay.
by saying that, but I love the birthday scene because
Mm,
this is a really specific moment. It's not my favorite moment of the film, when the green soldiers go
mm,
down, their parachutes go off in sync with the soundtrack, and from the
mm,
youngest of ages, that has just been that lovely little delightful bam bam, like done
yeah.
music. Everyone's on the same wavelength. But I love the whole concept of the birthday party. They're
Mm,
scouting out the toy that gets stood on. and they're like, "We'd
Yeah.
never leave a good soldier behind." Like it's so great. I absolutely love
Mm.
it. Big fan of that. So yeah, the birthday party sequence, Pizza Planet are probably my top two. Um, and that rounds me to my final thoughts on Toy Story. What do I think of Toy Story? 1995 Toy Story. As I said, it's one of the most important films ever made. It changed cinema in the retrospectively correct way. As technology evolved, a film like Toy Story would need to be made. And the fact it was Toy Story first, that it was family friendly, it launched a new studio. There was creative decisions for that to be made and for the film to work the way it did. And it utilized that technology. From a technical perspective, it will be one of the most respected films ever made. From a kid who grew up with it, one of the greatest films to have ever grown up with. And as an adult, a nostalgic adult, it's just one of my favorite films of all time. I've got nothing negative to say about this film, and I never will, and I will fight people on that. I will take no criticism of this film. Very sexually brought out. I'm joking. If someone had come on to talk about Toy Story, would be scrapping. But yeah, it's just one episode into the series, the highest bar of high bars is set, isn't it?
Mm.
And that's the fun thing about going back to Pixar, because it is one of the best studios. And it
Mm.
wouldn't have had that reputation. It wouldn't have maybe made the films it did if it didn't do Toy Story first.
Mm.
So credit to every single creator involved on that film. For the people that had to rewrite it to make it better. For the
Mm.
director who saw that and said, you know what, this isn't, I don't like any of these characters, we need to change it. For the voice cast involved, for the concept
Yeah.
itself. It's just a very, very rare, perfect film for me.
Yeah. It's one of those rare films where like it's culturally significant for what it did, and it's constantly kept at, it's a little bit like the original Star Wars or like other classics where it's like constantly left at a high bar because of the impact it had and because it is that film. And it's also one of those few examples where have always understood that hype. Like for me, similar to you, I cannot fault it. Even as a kid, like there are some films where you watch them as a kid, you love them to pieces. You watch them now, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is a bit iffy in places, or like a certain element doesn't
Yeah.
hold up as much. Whereas this, and to be honest, a lot of those early Pixar films still hold up for whatever reason. Though it's not my favorite Pixar film, anyone who says it is their favorite can completely understand why. Um, it's a landmark film for a number of reasons, and I can completely understand why it still is held in high regard because it still holds up from an animation standpoint, from a storytelling perspective, and it's endlessly quotable as well, which is something I didn't really take into account when rewatching it, but I was just sat there kind of mouthing the lines as they would appear, not quite remembering how quotable this film was. And that's always a good sign to how a film has kind of lasted in the pop culture zeitgeist, is if it's quotable and it's also a classic. That's kind of two of the big leading factors. But yeah, I love this film. I always have, always will. And I don't think anything's going to change that. Even if Toy Story 5 for some reason ends up being awful, that's not going to change how I feel about this first film and the other four. The other, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I love them. I love the characters. Everything about it is near perfect. Like, if you are going to fault this film, you're going to have to like be nitpicking the hell out of it.
It'll be something like, oh, this animation in the corner of this left-hand side of this one frame at this second didn't work. Like it's so specific. It's just
or it would be a personal preference thing where like, oh, I like this, but I don't necessarily like Randy Newman's songs, or I don't like this thing, or I don't like that thing. Like, it's all personal preference at the end of the day. But like, if you are going to nitpick it, it would probably be down to that rather than a legitimate actual flaw with the film.
Yeah, fully agreed. And with that being said, that is the first, I guess we can say, review done of the Pixar Retrospective, our review on Toy Story. That was a lot of fun. We're at 1 hour 24 minute mark, which is great. I did say I think it could go 90 minutes, an absolute push. And I've just realised we've gone longer than the film. It is a short film. That's the asterisk. But people may be wondering, what is next? What was the second Pixar film? Wow. Next up, we're going to be talking about A Bug's Life. Of course, it released the second before Toy Story 2. I cannot wait to talk about A Bug's Life. I will be campaigning for A Bug's Life 2, and I still am to this day. That's going to be going up next Tuesday the 2nd. And as you can see on the coming up page, we've also got Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc. and Finding Nemo. What an insane run. And that list is just going to keep improving. So I hope you do get to enjoy these across the winter period. Aaron, it's been a delight to have you on. I'm glad I got you on for the first one. You've very much helped me try to wrap my head around the behind the scenes angle. So thank you so much for that. What is currently going on with your writing and your channel? I know you've also had a very busy London Film Festival. The floor is yours.
Well, funnily enough, we were kind of saying this before we started recording, but like I'm in the same boat as you, whereby the London Film Festival kind of knocked me out a little bit. So I'm taking a bit of time to get back into the swing of things, especially regarding my channel. I've been consistently writing for the likes of Gatey Comic Con and Film Hounds and all that sort of stuff. So there are reviews and pieces floating about that are coming out either this week or next, or that have come out. I think the last piece I did was a feature for Get Your Comic Con about like the top 10 best or most memorable deaths from the Predator franchise. But I will be getting back into the swing of videos. I recorded one today about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek trilogy and how sad it is that that's no longer going to be a thing. And I've got a few other video ideas in the pipeline to kind of round out the rest of the year. So watch this space.
Excellent. Everyone, please follow Aaron there. You'll be able to get a link in the description below as well. And to everybody who's been watching, thank you all so much. Absolutely comment your thoughts on Toy Story, your thoughts on Pixar, what films you're looking forward to, what films maybe you aren't. Maybe you're going to rewatch them with us as we go amongst this on the next sort of 6-7 months. As I said, it's an insane schedule, an insane task to do. So we're only just beginning. I cannot wait to unveil. I say unveil like it's a transfer window. I can't wait if you see who else we've got on some of these videos who we'll be talking with. It's going to be a lot of fun. So once again, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one.